Hey, good morning, everybody jumping on. All right, it's 9 o'clock. I see some people trying to connect, and it sounds like a few people were having a challenge getting in this morning. So I just sent that link out, but while people are trickling in, we can go ahead and get started. Well, good morning. Welcome to October Community Collaboration Meeting. All the days and months are blending together. So my calendar says it's October, but I have no idea whether that's true or not. As you all know, I like to try to keep these meetings relatively short since we're all a little zoomed out, but and we can do a check-in about our kind of four areas of need we've been keeping an eye on ever since this pandemic started and since the CARES funding came in. But like I said in the agenda, I wanted to make sure we talked this morning mainly about the rental market, the coming eviction moratorium. Like, we know it got extended to the end of the year. We don't know if it's going to get extended again or not, but sooner or later that is going to hit us. And we figure if we're not the ones talking about it, there's not really else who would be talking about it in Lakewood. So we figured we needed to, even though we don't have great ideas or solutions for what to do. So we can just the logistics for our Zoom meetings. We don't have a huge group this morning right now. So if you want to, if you feel bold enough to just unmute yourself and ask a question, that's fine. Otherwise, you have the raising hand option in your engagement thing at the bottom, or go ahead and write something in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on the chat. If you have any questions or comments, I'll be putting a couple things in there in a little bit. And yeah, that's it. I figured the first people I talked to, and a good way to start this conversation, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to look at the, well, I have too much stuff on my screen, like an amateur. Come on. So I talked to the community development department and asked them this question, like, hey, we're going to talk about the eviction crisis and the rental market. And I was originally thinking of having someone who's working on that from community development come talk to us this morning. We didn't have anybody who was available. But they wrote me up a summary of what they're thinking. And so I figured we kind of go over these 7 things as kind of a precursor. So the first one they had was a question, which was, do we have any idea on the percentage of renters currently paying rents, and conversely, the percentage of renters who are not paying rent or falling behind? I told them this was a question that we asked last month at the community collaboration meeting. Like, what are we hearing from the families that we're working with? Are they falling behind? Are they worried about falling behind? And the general consensus was some are falling behind, especially since the enhanced unemployment benefits ran out at the end of July. So some are starting to not pay, some are continuing to pay, but by making sacrifices in other areas that are unsustainable. So there's a concern that some households will stop paying rent at some point here. They want to emphasize the housing market is much more fragile than we think. This is the common theme for all of them. And we know this, this isn't news to us. This was a problem before the pandemic started, and the pandemic has just made this worse. I was reading the other day an article, like a Crosscut article, just about a study looking at if there are mass evictions in King County, where are those most likely to come from? And they're going to come from South King County. So the least, kind of going back to looking at number 3 that they talked about, like the most affordable housing, the unsubsidized housing that's appropriate for low-income, middle-income renters, that is going to be affected the most. That's true here in Lakewood and throughout Pierce County. It's also true in South King County. So they looked and said, where is the most quote unquote affordable rental units in King County? Well, they're in South King County. And so that's where most of the evictions are going to come from. And we know we are already dealing with not only our own housing issue, but the pressure of the housing issues from up north. So as King County becomes increasingly unaffordable, people keep moving down. And so we can assume that that trickle effect will happen with evictions, with an accelerated evictions problem as well, right? People will have an eviction problem in Lakewood, but we're also going to have people being evicted in South King County, and some percentage of them will likely start moving south, like a lot of other people are doing, to find more affordable rent. They'll move to Tacoma. Tacoma will move south to Lakewood looking for places to rent. So that's going to put even more pressure on us. Going back to that point too. They made the point that, one thing we might hope is that the higher income rents, we have a very I was talking about K-shaped recovery, a K-shaped rental market. We have very high quality, expensive rental housing, and we have low income housing, and the high income housing is not expected to come down in price, even if evictions rise, because they will not be as affected. And then number 5, they wanted to emphasize, again, not a shock to any of us who work with families, work with the community, but this eviction, they want to raise awareness that the eviction problem, and especially an accelerated eviction problem, will exacerbate the existing housing instability problem that we have. So this can lead directly to an increased homelessness problem. And we all know it is a critical thing to try to accomplish to prevent homelessness, because keeping someone in their home, preventing homeless, is relatively much easier and much cheaper than working with someone who has become homeless to get them rehoused. And so preventing homelessness, especially if we see a big homelessness rise coming, has to be something that we think about. Their point number 6 is the one I wanted to emphasize, that I think is, from what I'm interested to see what you all have to say, but their point 6 I think is really important, that keeping up with rent right now is really important. And then number 6, they expect to get worse. I'm going to stop sharing so we can talk about this for a second. But I was having this conversation about point 6 in where I live in East Tacoma. We have some renters who are asking the question, are we chumps for continuing to pay our rent? Because if the moratorium gets extended again, it looks like the math works in our favor to just not pay rent for a while. So they're saying, if we don't pay rent until March, what if we just stop and we have 6 to 9 months of not paying rent? And if we're low income, we can use that money to get caught up on other debts. We can pocket that and then use that as a down payment to move into somewhere else to rent. And my response was essentially what our community development department wrote there for point 6 was, no, that's going to backfire on you. I understand the temptation to do that, but what's going to happen is, if we have an eviction boom kind of all at once or in a short period of time, you're also going to have a sharp increase in demand for the rental units that are available, especially the ones that are affordable, which is going to drive the price of those up. And you're going to have a whole bunch of landlords who have fallen behind on maybe their mortgage payments. They're going to want to make up that lost income. So rents are going to go up even higher. So yeah, I know it makes sense to pocket that cash for a while, but what is going to be required of you to get into a new place is going to be more, most likely, than what you're saving by not paying rent. And you will have an eviction on your record, which no one's going to rent to you anyway, even if you could put 5 months rent down. And if you could put 5 months rent down, just keep paying your existing rent for 5 months. So that's the thing that I was thinking about since that conversation, was what maybe our role and the city's role and human services role and Lakewood's Promise role, who's kind of overseeing our collaboration process, can be trying to raise awareness that we will connect you with financial coaching resources. We have those in the community, as many rental assistance and housing assistance, things that we can find. But the goal has got to be to try to keep up with your rent while we also work on our longer term workforce development strategy to get incomes up so that we can afford the rents that we have, which isn't great to someone who's seeing maybe a light at the end of the tunnel of I could just not pay rent for a while and actually breathe a little bit. But I think that's going to lead to a worse problem later. And just before I open it up in a second, I'm going to put something in the Michelle, you asked for the agenda in the chat. The agenda is basically talk about evictions. So I'm going to get out there. And then so the evictions, the other, just the FYI, in case you haven't been with us the last few months, just a reminder of the other four areas we've been keeping an eye on based on assessing the needs when COVID first kind of hit us. The four things we want to keep an eye on are economic resilience, which is related to this conversation. Youth mental health was kind of number like 1A, and especially with over the summer learning loss, and now with the virtual schooling and not being able to socialize. The youth mental health, economic resilience, access to food, and domestic violence and behavioral health are kind of the four main things we're keeping an eye on, so we can think about those. One thing I am going to put in the chat really quick, because if we do talk more about a communication strategy for keeping up with rents. There is so that's I just put a Google Drive link in the chat if you want to look at this document. Because you may recall back in 2019, we were talking about, or we were doing a needs survey, a community needs survey, and gathering data and perspective from the community and from you all to update our community needs assessment that we last did in 2014. And then we started writing a draft community needs report in the beginning of 2020. And then when the pandemic hit, I put that in a drawer because I didn't know if any of that would be valid, just given how much things have changed. And as we have learned that COVID exacerbated the existing problems we had more than created new problems, we pulled that report back out and have been looking at it the last couple of months and added in a little COVID update. So here's what we've been doing as a result of COVID the last couple of months. So that document is available in the chat. I made the accessibility so you could comment on it. So take a look at that. That could be a place where we could add a page about evictions and kind of that advice and that math of let's keep up with rent. That's got to be the priority. And then we can use parts of that report, like on the city's social media page to help get the word out to keep up with rents, and resources like financial coaching for people that want to actually do that. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. Yeah, okay, with all that, any responses or other ideas? Or is that all crazy, or is that all way off base?
Hi, Brian, it's Carolyn.
Hi.
Hey, a couple of things I was thinking about. One is, in addition to all the problems we're having, also in Woodbrook, they are leveling a lot of the properties to make room for the warehousing to accommodate the new, I think they're planning for the extension to go from Spanaway to I-5. So they're kind of preparing for all of that by putting in these warehousing projects so that they can have access to I-5. And so that's a problem for us particularly. But we're also in Pierce County, we're like sandwiched between, so people in King and South King who might be making more money in terms of their wage coming down here is a benefit for them because they're going to pay less rent. But people in Pierce County, it's not like they can go down to Olympia because so they're like sandwiched here. And I've even talked to clients about trying to move out of this congested area to, either, like the eastern part of areas like Bonnie Lake, all of those things, Bonnie Lake, whatever. And they haven't had a whole lot of success with that either because there's just not even as much housing available. One thought I've had, though, is there's a lot of people in the lower income housing brackets that are on Social Security benefits. So in effect, they're not really limited by the employment situation. So they do have, in a sense, more mobility. So I don't know if there's any way to locate housing for them outside of this megalopolis on the I-5 corridor, but I don't know if anybody has explored that possibility, but there's a lot of individuals that could relocate out of here without that being, an economic problem for them, since they're not part of the workforce, if that makes sense.
And that's a great point, and there's a bunch of great points. And if anybody else wants to respond, feel free to. But as much as we kind of focus on children, youth, and families, like when I was doing financial coaching in Pierce County a couple of years ago, I thought helping seniors, even a few years ago, helping seniors was the hardest one to work on, because there was, at least with families, you can say, what's the option to increase your income either now or a couple of years from now? But with seniors on Social Security who are like, maybe had a reason they couldn't go back to work, it was like, well, if your rent is more than your Social Security, you're just, I don't know what to do. And the financial coaching for seniors just kind of over and over again saying, I don't know. Sometimes we explored that option of, can we move somewhere else? But even the costs of finding a new place, of moving someone to that new place, finding those costs is hard. And a lot of times seniors are saying, maybe that makes my housing more affordable, but I depend on my community, maybe my family, my children are nearby, and they're helping me kind of get by with everything else. So I might be able to make my housing work, but then I lose a bunch of other things that I need, especially as I get older and depend on them more. So for some people, that's a great strategy, but then we also hit those roadblocks. And yeah, we've all been going through this back and forth of trying to, we talked last year about, tracking some of the youth zip codes, some of the youth that are using our programs in Lakewood. There was a trend where the zip codes of where those families were coming from went out to rural Pierce County, out to Graham for a while, and then they started coming back because Graham was a little more affordable, and so they went further and further out. And now, if you've ever been out to Graham and Roy and stuff recently, they're just exploding with houses at one of the fastest growing parts in the state. And so that place has gotten less affordable, and so those families have been moving back to Lakewood, which is now the most affordable place, but we didn't get less expensive. We're just less expensive compared to other places now. And we only have that shifting problem of let's find maybe someone could go to somewhere like Eastern Washington, or we'll skip over Olympia. Maybe there's places in Chehalis and Centralia people can start going, but anywhere you go, the housing problem follows those local wages. So it's there's less, housing is less expensive here, but wages are also much lower as well. And so solving that problem for a family has been brutal. And just one other thing you mentioned that I'm participating in a lot of these online conversations with the Lakewood community, and the whole the building of warehouses is obviously extremely controversial. And a lot of people saying, why are we not building more affordable housing? Why are we building all these warehouses for jobs? But there's that tension of we need more jobs. We especially need more living wage jobs. So part of it all kind of seems to go back to a workforce conversation, which is why that's Lakewood Promises number one strategy we're working on with the colleges is if we have more jobs coming to Lakewood because we're investing in all of these the warehouses and other and then even some Class A buildings for white collar jobs, are we making sure that we are preparing Lakewood residents to be the ones to take those jobs so that they can afford housing, rather than, like you were saying, someone from King County coming down and taking that job? The trend is someone from King County moves to Pierce County because it's more affordable here and they bring their higher wages. They eventually get sick of the commute, so they look for a job that's local, and then as those jobs come here, they'll take those jobs. So we're trying to figure out how to prepare now Lakewood residents to take on those jobs. But that's a medium-term strategy. Tier 1 strategy is more housing. That's brutal to do. Tier 2 strategy is workforce development, get incomes up. Doesn't work for seniors. And even for families, that's a long-term, medium-term strategy. It takes a couple of years, which is why if we have an 18-month workforce development strategy and we have an eviction crisis coming in 3 months, that's why we're talking about this. So what's our third tier? Not great, but Band-Aid issue in the meantime while we work on a workforce development strategy. Sorry for the diatribe. Any other reactions? Those are lots of great points, Carolyn.
I guess my question, I think you're right. There's longer term strategies and it's complicated strategies. I'm glad people are working on those. when we're talking with families, of course, we're encouraging them to pay rent if they can. A lot of them didn't qualify for unemployment, but lost their job. And so they never got the additional unemployment. So they're falling behind on rent. So I guess my question is that, you know, those families that it's not possible for them to stay up on rent and they're staying in their housing because of the moratorium, is there going to be funding locally or otherwise to help pay off what is going to be a pretty large amount of rent debt to their landlords? Like, is that a strategy? Can we talk about that? How we get funding to Lakewood to keep families in their houses?
Yeah, of course we can talk about that. And let's keep in mind too that we obviously there's no hint yet of another stimulus, but at some point there likely will be. We don't know how big it will be, but between the states, the opportunities the state is going to afford us as we get closer, I mean, eventually the state's going to have to say, we can't push evictions out forever. And so when that starts looming, I'm guessing the state is going to release some funding and some opportunities, and there will probably be a federal stimulus. So one of the things that we can do as a group is to say, we want to make sure we prioritize now, if more funding or as more funding comes down the pike from the state and from the feds, we recommend more of that go into negotiating and paying off rent debt to help people who could not, even if they wanted to, keep up with rent, get caught up at that time. Yeah. And one person I might put on the spot is Ellie, who I see is on. And one thing that she's been doing on behalf of Lakewood's Promise is engaging with more churches. Because if there's a resource in the community where we could say, well, where is maybe not necessarily just money for paying off rent, but like where are resources, where are people who are doing things in the community at the grassroots level, and what is their role? What ideas do they have? What resources do they have? What are they already doing? That's a group we would want to be talking with more and helping raise awareness for them. Because I know the churches sometimes say, their kind of go-to is we see churches up north of us all getting into offering their parking lots for car camping, but that we A, don't love that, and B, that seems like a temporary solution. So how can we be more engaged in a long-term actual solution? Nellie, I don't know if you've been having those conversations or how those conversations have been going so far. Wait, I'm gonna unmute you. Wait. There you go.
Okay. So far, I've had contact with 6 different faith communities that are interested in being a part of the collaboration. And we have just basically covered the initial mission of Lakewood's Promise and of Lakewood's collaboration. So we've just, begun the conversations along the lines of food, rent, housing, and so on. I believe that the United Methodist Church here is extremely interested in finding out more about what we know and are, I think, connected this morning. And also St. Francis Cabrini are also very interested in knowing those kinds of issues as well and are ready, willing, and able to collaborate. So I'll continue, working with those 6 as well as bringing others on board. And perhaps we can have a meeting of that group, the faith community group, and see exactly where the issues are with their families that they work with and see what we can do about resolving some of these issues in some way, strategizing together. Any other thoughts on that from anyone else?
I wonder if one thing we could talk about, just brainstorming, is if more federal or state resources could come down, we could have more of a conversation of really just back paying rents as much as possible to a degree. Not sure how far that would go, but But if we're talking about local resources, it could be a little bit more incentivizing, like starting to make the landlords whole. Because I know one of the problems is, renters who fall behind, even if they can make the rent payments, the expectation is going to be, we know you can't make up 3 to 5 months rent all at once, but we need to figure out like a payment plan so you get caught up in like a year. But rents are already unaffordable. So if you tack on another $300 or $400 a month, maybe $500 a month to get caught up, that's going to be hard to do. But maybe like down payment assistance, like we'll find some resources to help make, like we'll make a $1,500 or a 1 month rent payment as kind of a down payment on a payment plan, and to help the landlords keep going, and then to incentivize a repayment plan to help get those families start getting caught up. You still run into the problem of like, is that payment going to be affordable? But that's why we're also collecting financial coaching resources as best we can.
Brian, one thought I was thinking about is if some of these landlords, if there's a way to, like if in the bigger complexes where they have like multiple people where this has occurred, if there's any way to negotiate with them a one-time settlement of money to cover all of those people, because it is expensive for them to evict people. It's very thousands of dollars. And then they have a number of apartments vacant, so they lose some funding there. So I just wonder if there's any way to, for the city of Lakewood, even for, the mayor's office or whatever, if there's any way for them to be able to step in and intervene and negotiate a payoff price with some of these, because I just don't think our people are going to be able to, I couldn't make up 3 or 5 months rent. So that was one of my thoughts, is that.
That's a great thought. And I did bring that up to community development when we spoke, and said, I think that's going to be the expectation, is that the city plays that role. And so I want to explore whether or not that makes sense for us. And their initial reaction was the landlords know that they are at risk of just losing that money. So if you evict somebody and they're 5 or 6 months behind, they're never going to pay. But if you can go, and then you just out that money, and you can increase your rents to try to make up for it, but it's going to take years to make up that difference. So there's an incentive. They already have an incentive trying to negotiate with people who are behind on rent to try to recoup at least some of that lost money. And they said the landlords are already engaged in those conversations because they actually don't want to lose people. They want them to stay and be incentivized to try to make up some of what they're not paying. But they can't in most cases. So it's this kind of stuck of like, well, you have to start making these payments. So I can't make those payments. I can't make my current rent payment. But they're starting that conversation. So whether or not there's another avenue or facilitating that conversation, again, that's where I'd love to have a financial coach, make financial coaches available in the middle of that. Like you guys look at the numbers, and help represent the family to help facilitate these conversations, and then take some liability off of us as well. But
Brian?
Yeah.
Andy here. Is there any ever effort to get a collaborative group of owners having conversations?
There has been in the past a landlord kind of group. I don't think there is one now, or an effort to bring one together.
It seems to me that's the way that we ought to go. Just as we try to get communities to collaborate, we maybe should urge landlords to get together, have a better understanding of what the community's issues are and how to address these things collaboratively rather than competitively. Since it costs people a lot to evict, it costs them a lot to evict someone. They lose rent, they have expenses, they have cleanup, so on and so forth. It seems to me it's to everybody's benefit to try to work these problems out, make settlements, et cetera.
Absolutely, and especially after the eviction, and they also lose all that income of however many months the person wasn't paying rent. And then you're facing all the people who are going to be applying to move into your unit are people that also got evicted. So they're not looking forward to that shuffle of, great, I have to pick between 100 people who all got evicted and didn't pay rent for 6 months. They rent my unit. That's not great either. So,
but we could we could ask the city, maybe the rental housing folks could convene landlords to brainstorm their thoughts about the approach so that we don't view them as the enemy. We're all in this together. People either have housing and resources or they don't. And you can't get blood out of a turnip. So let's turn the turnips into something more productive. Not to imply they're turnips either.
No, I think that would be appealing, Andy.
Can I have two questions. When you say financial coaches in Lakewood, like who are those people? What are the organizations that are providing that? And my second question is, are there organizations on the call this morning that are thinking or considering about applying for the All in Washington grant, which is for, COVID relief, emergency, kind of flexible financial assistance to individuals or families. And it's up to the organization to discern, to come up with a process of how they're giving out that financial assistance to families. And I ask that because we're considering it and we'd love to be part of a coalition, especially if there's a coalition of financial coaches that could come alongside that financial assistance.
Just to answer your first question while the other ones are coming on, the kind of main source for the kind of financial coaching that we're talking about has been United Way's Center for Strong Families Network. And so we already have one based out of the Pierce College or the Clover Park campus, which has traditionally been more just for the students. But we've been talking to United Way about how to make that available to the whole community. And then they have 7 or 8 organizations where they have coaches embedded. Sound Outreach has a bunch. And then I don't know how many others they have, but we've been like the city manager has been talking to United Way for a while about expanding that network of financial coaches. And so Harborstone Credit Union is one of the main partners for the Center for Strong Family Network. And so they have specifically been looking at how to increase, they have also their own kind of network of like financial mentors internally that aren't quite the like grassroots social service background type people, but they're doing a lot as well. So it was mainly the conversations with United Way and Harborstone about increasing our financial coaching capacity in Lakewood.
Well, is there a possibility of reaching out to like our accountants here in Lakewood, as well as our other banks here in Lakewood, to see what kind of coaches we might get from those businesses here?
Yeah, just more capacity for offering that service in the community. It's good, yeah.
Right.
And I think that is a longer term strategy. I'm hoping to have a person we could refer to and potentially go in on this grant together and get some funds to kind of go alongside financial coaching would be awesome.
I'm looking at that, Carrie. That's interesting. That one was not on my radar.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what exactly does what's the benefit of a financial coach? What can they do for a person?
So they would, especially the way that the Center for, so there's 2 real benefits to especially the Center for Strong Family model. One is the financial coaching is embedded with other services. So the Center for Strong Families model is you actually have 3 types of services interlocking. So you have the financial coaching, you have career coaching, and you have, you gather as many support services available as possible. So you start with the financial coaching, you look at someone's budget, and typically you say, hey, you're earning $1,500 a month. You got $2,200 of expenses. We got to talk about getting your income up. Oh, well, look, I have a career coach sitting right next to me. Let's talk about what your opportunities are. So that's part of it. And the other benefit is that the financial coaches can just help work with whatever issues going on. And so, so first of all, scarcity mindset is typically what people are dealing with when they're walking in to meet with a financial coach. And so they just can't think clearly about they're at risk of being taken advantage of by other financial folks. So this is how people get, really high interest auto loans or get into a debt collection service that's just going to charge them lots of money for stuff they can do. The financial coaches just offer perspective. Like, look, here are 3 things you can do by yourself. Here's a few ways we can cut down and make your budget work for the next 6 months while we work on a longer term plan. And just a little bit of affirmation of like, yeah, your expenses, your rent went up, your wages didn't. That sucks. Like, let's talk about how to fix this problem. So some affirmations a little bit, and things like that. And just sometimes folks don't know who they can negotiate with. So, hey, well, you can negotiate with your landlord. You can negotiate with your creditors. Like, these folks bought your debt for pennies on the dollar. You don't have to pay them 100% of what they owe. So all that kind of stuff, depending on their situation, they can just help them navigate, save money, and also come up with a plan. Like, here's where you want to be 3 years from now. Here's the first steps to take today to get there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and a good point, Dave, about like, yeah, a lot of small business owners could be good financial coaches. That also goes back to what Andy was saying, like in general, business owners, landlords, like more of those folks should be on board to be part of the solution. Yeah.
My guess is, and I don't know how to, I guess I'm on, okay. My guess is most landlords, if they're small landlords, are feeling just as isolated as their in trouble renters. Thinking, I'm not getting my rent. I don't know how I'm going to make my expenses. I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills. How am I going to get rid of these deadbeats? Stuff like that. They're probably not in very good shape either. I would think that the larger ones are in a different category. There probably a lot of them are absentees and maybe don't give a rip about anything except getting the money. And I don't know. I shouldn't speak that way because maybe they're great, but if they don't live here, they may not know the local problems. But I think anything the city could do to convene people, just as we've done with the collaborative efforts on the service side. You know, if you know each other, you're more inclined to be supportive, work together, try to find community solutions rather than what's in it for me. And the city is a neutral convener. I don't know of anybody else who could convene people, but that would be my thought. Just let's work together. But with all parties, not just with the renters. Is there also any possibility for in-kind rent? In other words, I'll do some maintenance, I'll do some cleanup, I'll do some whatever in exchange for a month's rent, or a settlement when I finally do get back to, where I could be evicted. I don't have any idea what kind of programs are available, but I think we need to think creatively.
Or even just reduced rent.
Yeah, sure. If you pitch in, we'll help you out with reduced rent.
That's part of the value, like I said, of talking to the landlords and the owners, just figure out what do you need in general, not just those rent payments, but the things that you need. Maybe there's an opportunity to meet one need with the other. I mean, James asking a good question. What are the resources out there to help landlords absorb the losses? There aren't really that I know of, other than like some of the CARES money went into mortgage assistance, but that's why we're talking about having this conversation, right? Like, both parties are being hurt. If someone gets evicted after not paying rent for 6 months, the landlord suffers and the household that got evicted suffers. So there's an incentive, which a lot of those families and landlords are going to work it out themselves. Hopefully more than we fear might be the case, and they'll say like, I don't know how I'm going to make it, but you don't want to lose all this money. I'll make extra payments for a year or 18 months. But that's a hard one.
Yes.
I have another thought. Lakewood has a lot of people with a lot of resources. And a lot of them have done very well in the last 4 years with the market going up. I think we ought to try to tap into them. Say, how would you be willing to be part of creating a fund in Lakewood that would assist those of our neighbors who are having a rough time?
I wonder if, and those of you from the churches who are on, I wonder if that is something that should be part of the, like if we, so one of the takeaways here is to convene that like faith-based organization conversation Ellie was talking about, and kind of put that on their radar. Like that could be a hub for something like that to take place.
Well, it certainly is a topic to be discussed.
So let me summarize. We're at 9:40 right now. Let me summarize my kind of, I may have a lot of takeaways and a lot of notes, but I have 4 action items that I'm going to follow up on. So one is kind of preparing internally and talking about making sure, to the degree that another stimulus comes down, state and or federal, we are looking at covering rent. But that's a priority we want to look at and be ready for. I'm going to follow up with Ellie about a faith-based organization meeting specifically. I'm going to talk to community development about landlords meeting, and then get back to Lakewood's promise about that. And then continuing to talk about financial coaching / this All in Washington grant. Carrie, are you intending to apply? Are you going to be a lead on that, or are you looking for someone to be the lead?
We would be willing to be the lead. It's due in 9 days.
Okay.
So I think we're going to apply. You can apply either as an individual organization or as a coalition. And we'd be happy to take the lead if people want to join and basically have access to financial assistance for clients you serve. And we would come up with a system together about how we would determine need and funding, but we're happy to take the lead, so to speak.
So then would you put your email in the chat, and then if anybody wants to be go in on that or is interested, you already put the link for the actual grant in there in the chat. And if I can work on a letter of support from the city for that coalition as well to support that grant application. If you or if somebody else ends up taking the lead, that'd be great.
That'd be awesome.
And any other resources or grant opportunities or things that we see to bring those resources, we'll look at. Let's do organizational updates really quick, and then we'll loop back in really quick to see if anybody has final thoughts about what we've been talking about. Obviously, this is the beginning of this conversation. It's still a few months away, but we obviously wanted to kind of take some time to get some legs under us. So anybody have organizational updates?
Sure. This is Jesus Villegas, Clover Park School District. I'm the McKinney-Vento liaison. One of my roles as I work with the homeless population. Just want to say I'll put my info in the chat that any family that's either on the verge, we know they are going to be losing housing or have lost housing, and they have students in their school district, they should be referred to the McKinney-Vento liaison. State required for identification, but also since last year, I've been able to have some new partnerships, and that sometimes when no other organization can help, we've been able to help with deposit to get new permanent housing, or on some occasions even help remove some barriers to prevent the loss of housing. So we may have some additional things. And I would also be interested in any meetings concerning with any faith communities or any other work through this. I'd be interested in being part of that as well.
Well, thank you. Kara, were you clapping or raising your hand? Clapping. Raising your hand. Okay, there you go. Well, thank you, Hazel. Any other updates? If you see in the chat, Dave says St. Vincent de Paul is providing $200 in assistance to families in Lakewood for rent to utilities. Yeah, it's every little thing makes a difference. Suzanne.
Yes, hi. This is Suzanne with Korean Women's Association. I think in a previous month, I talked about the CRISP Healthy Parent classes, which are free health classes that are open to pregnant women and parents of children up to 5 years old in all of Pierce County, including Lakewood. And parents get $20 gift card each month they participate. And in addition to that, we have gotten additional funding from other organizations like the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation to be able to really provide care packages to all the participating parents. And those are more like COVID-19 safety types of items. So if you do know of parents who qualify, I can certainly share with you the flyer and the registration link. And I'll kind of include it in this chat here as well.
Thank you. Yeah, please do. Anyone else? I have one really quick. So the council had a little bit of CARES money left over and prioritized childcare. We know childcare is a major issue for families going back to work, and we couldn't provide as much as we wanted, but we just decided to give. We have 34, according to Department of Children, Youth and Families, we have 34 family and center childcare providers that are open and licensed in Lakewood. And so we just reached out to every single one of them and offered them operations funding. And we have an almost 100% response rate. And so we're working on contracts to get them all between $2,000 and $3,000 for a little bit of funding. So we wish we could do more, but at least we're supporting the childcare providers as best we can.
And I have a little bit of an update. I mean, our staff at communities and schools are reaching out. We have about 200 kids that we're case managing, that we're doing home visits with, trying to keep them engaged in learning and engaged in school and overcoming barriers. We're doing deliveries home every week to now 156 kids with food, but also other things. We have a large donation of cloth masks that are going to be going out to our kids. If there's a need that we're seeing for specifically engaging kids in school, it's headphones. We've bought a lot of headphones at full price right now, and we're going to be starting to do a kind of headphone donation drive for our students that we still haven't been able to reach. And then just connecting, with relationships and getting them involved in school. I'd love if people have families who might need financial assistance, I really do think to participate in this All In for Washington grant. Part of it can go to administration, and it really is just it's supporting Lakewood funding to go to specific Lakewood families. And there's no catch. The financial assistance is whatever we determine is the need. So I'd love to hear from organizations that are wanting to partner with that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely apply for that. All right. Any other updates or thoughts about the topics today, or about anything we missed about youth mental health or domestic violence or access to food we should be aware of? Other than there are lots of needs across the board. Yeah, Suzanne, you want to drop your email in the chat really quick, and then thank you. And then with that, I think we'll close this out. Any final thoughts, panics? What's the over under on by the time we have the next collaboration meeting, knowing who the next president's going to be? Are we going to know by second weekend in November? Yes, no? All right. Well, thanks everybody. Good luck to all of us in the next month, and get your ballots in. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.